Hello, Gamer with Taste here with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Dead Space likes and how we need more of them because I love Dead Space and I feel like there's just not enough games like Dead Space these days. Um, I really just fell in love with Dead Space because I loved the horror genre at the time. At the time, the horror genre was really catching me, and I watched a lot of horror movies. I really loved horror games. Horror games were amazing to me, but my first horror game was Dead Space, and Dead Space taught me. Well, I think it was my first. Either that or Condemned. I Probably Dead Space. I think Dead Space was my first one. And Dead Space was like, it filled me with anxiety when I was thinking about playing it. I wanted to play it so I could get farther, but it filled me with dread and anxiety thinking about how I would handle the next part. If the next part would include the Ubermorph, or if I don't know what it was about it, but I got so scared. If I had enough resources to be able to get through the next part. And I eventually beat the game and I felt so good. Like, I ended up playing Dead Space 1 over 20 times, I think. At least over a dozen times. And I know I played Dead Space 2 over 20 times. And Dead Space 3, we don't always talk about Dead Space 3. Dead Space 3 kind of sucked. And it kind of wrote the series into a ground. It did some things well, but we're not here to talk about Dead Space necessarily. We're talking about the fact that we need more games like Dead Space. So, I have the whiteboard here. So we're going to go through it. Now, you might be asking yourself, what characteristics make a Dead Space like? I'm kind of adapting this from the whole Souls-like concept. I want Dead Space likes. So, first concept is it's a third-person shooter, all right? Third-person shooter pretty much goes a long way to make any game feel like a Dead Space game. It's not everything, but I mean, Dead Space is obviously a third-person shooter. So, yeah, you kind of need to be a third-person shooter, okay? It's just kind of required. If you want to be a Dead Space, you need to be a third-person shooter, okay? And then, it needs to aim over the shoulder. So, what that means is that when you aim down sights while playing the game, it aims over the shoulder, right? Now, there was one gun in Dead Space 2 where you aimed and it looked down a scope for you. That's fine, at least for one or two guns, I suppose. But honestly, for the most part, I don't really think actual iron sight mode or scopes really fit into the idea of a Dead Space like. It's kind of weird. You could implement it and it wouldn't really make it a non-Dead Space like. It would still be a Dead Space like, but I don't know, something about scopes, just don't overuse them, right? They can be on one or two guns or something, but overall, iron sights really aren't accepted. And then we have to have a primary and an alternate firing mode. So you fire one way, and that's the main way that your gun can fire. And there is a secondary or an alternate way to fire your gun. So two different ways to fire one gun, just one, right? And there are multiple guns, right? So another key part is stressful combat. So there's got to be numerous enemies. There's got to be random spawns. Getting surrounded has to be part of the combat. Tough difficulty has to exist there. Now, I know when people think of games with tough difficulties, they often think of stuff like Dark Souls and things like that. They think of... I don't know what else they think of. I'm sure there's others. Maybe Skyrim on legendary difficulty, right? Maybe Oblivion Remastered on master difficulty, something like that, maybe. I'm not entirely sure what other games have super, super hard difficulties, but Dead Space, for the fan base, I'm sure, is very, very widely known for the tough difficulties that it has. I mean, you can play on easy mode, right? And easy mode is super, super easy. It's a breeze. And I think that's a good thing. I think it should have easy mode. I don't think easy mode shouldn't be there. I don't think it should be a game that is inherently super hard. That's not part of what makes a Dead Space like a Dead Space like. It can be easy, but you have to have a challenge inside that game. So in Dead Space 1, you had impossible mode, which it was tough, but it wasn't impossible. You still had your checkpoints. You still had your save points. You had everything you needed to get through it all. It was a tough difficulty, but other than that, it was very doable. In Dead Space 2, however, all that changed. And they brought in hardcore mode. And in hardcore mode, you only got 3 saves throughout the entire game. And guess what? Guess what else? No checkpoints. No checkpoints at all. And if you died, you went back to your last save. And it was kind of funny, too. When the game first released, it had 2 discs. So once you got to like chapter 7, just before you got to chapter 7, it asked you to switch discs. And switching discs counted as a soft save. So if you died, it would actually start you at the beginning of that disc. So yeah, that was kind of a weird little tech back in the day. But now if you play Dead Space 2 on like Xbox Series, you're not going to be able to do that. That's not going to be part of it. So, but 3 saves throughout the entire game. It's the hardest difficulty. It's on the hardest difficulty. So you get the least amount of resources and the least amount of money. And at the same time, enemies do the most damage to you. And you only get 3 saves, no checkpoints. So it was tough. It was really tough. You had to work pretty hard. You had to have game knowledge. You had to know to telekinesis the spitters' acid bombs and throw them back at them. And you had to really use every single resource at your disposal wisely. And it was awesome. I loved it. I beat Dead Space 2 on hardcore mode like 3 times, I think. I would have beaten it 4 times if I would care to, but I just don't. It's a stressful thing to do. Beating Dead Space 2 on hardcore mode is not something I do for fun. So, but I do want that hard difficulty in there. That hard difficulty needs to be in a Dead Space like. It needs to be in a Dead Space like. It's just part of the identity. It can be Dead Space like without it, I guess. But without that hard difficulty, the soul of Dead Space like is just missing. The challenge should be there. It can be easy, but you need that extra challenge. Okay, moving on. So, you also need a wide yet limited array of weaponry. So, in Dead Space, you had maybe 6 to a dozen guns to choose from. Somewhere around there, maybe. And it was wide enough because each gun had a primary and secondary fire. So 6 guns is 12 different tools at your disposal, right? 12 guns is 24 different tools at your disposal, which is actually pretty pretty recognizably big. It's all right. It's not bad. It's definitely good, especially for a story-driven game where there's really only one way to kill enemies, and it's to shoot their limbs, and that's really it. Like, there's not a whole lot more to it. So each gun like can only vary by so much, I suppose. They did a good job making the guns vary. It's not like the guns didn't vary. It's not like they didn't have their purposes, their uses, especially in Dead Space 2. In Dead Space 2, they nailed the weaponry. The weaponry was pretty limited, but there were a lot of choices. A lot more than there probably needed to be, especially for your first playthrough. But I remember picking like one gun to be my favorite weapon for the whole playthrough and just sticking with that one weapon. And I would do full playthroughs with each and every single weapon just because it was fun. I'd be on like the easiest or second easiest difficulty, but that's what I did. I didn't have anything better to do with my life as a child, so I found it fun. I found it interesting. So I do think it needs to be limited though. Dead Space 3 brought in like craft your own weapons, and that's limited too, but I don't know. The craft your own weapons thing would have been better if they would have reworked the ammo. And honestly, you could create really overpowered stuff. Really overpowered weapons. I'm telling you, if you want to beat Dead Space 3 without dying on the hardest, like if you want to beat it on, I think it's hardcore mode. If you want to beat it on the hardest difficulty, and it requires you to beat it without dying, then all you need is I forget what it's called, a diffraction torus. All you need is a diffraction torus on your weapon and you're golden. Anyways, though, moving on. So, what games are examples of Dead Space likes? So we got Remnant 2. Remnant 2 is a Dead Space like. Obviously Dead Space. Duh. Dead Space would be Dead Space like. There is the Callisto Protocol. Callisto Protocol wasn't widely received as a good game. It was fine. It had more melee in it than a Dead Space like should have. And yeah, it wasn't great, but it was good enough. And I put Outriders in here just because Outriders does have that third-person shooting, third-person shooter, aim over the shoulder. Primary and secondary firing modes was kind of there with some of the mods after the DLC. Not exactly, but kind of. It was kind of there. It definitely had stressful combat. I liked that. Wide yet limited array of weaponry. I would say that kind of counts. You had a lot of choices with your weaponry, especially if you consider mods. But yeah, Outriders was kind of a different sort of game. You also had abilities, which isn't necessarily part of what Dead Space is. You have telekinesis and you have stasis in Dead Space, and that's really it. You don't really have anything else. So all the abilities that you had in Outriders was a little different. It wasn't RPG. You did build a character, so it was kind of Dead Space-like, but it had its differences, so I don't know. But Remnant 2 is the biggest one. Remnant 2 is definitely a Dead Space-like, and you can throw Remnant 1 in here too. I think that would count. But Remnant 1 and Remnant 2 were definitely Dead Space-likes. And obviously the Callisto Protocol was Dead Space-like. It was really trying to be Dead Space in the middle of that game. It was really trying. It was actually really cringy. But yeah. I would really like to see more Dead Space likes. More games like Remnant 2. About the only thing that you might consider putting into a Dead Space like that doesn't really belong in a Dead Space like game would be a cover system. Outriders had a cover system, but you really didn't use it. You used it when you were leveling up, but once you got a really high level, you really weren't meant to use it. It was really just there so that you understood how the NPCs would take cover and maneuver through the world. Uh, and that's really it, you know? But yeah, I guess that's about everything I wanted to talk about. We really don't have very many Dead Space games, Dead Space likes. Like, we had the original Dead Space trilogy, but we don't really have very many other games that are quite like it. We have Remnant 1 and 2, and that's pretty much it. You know, that's really kind of it. Like, Outriders, it's kind of a Dead Space like. You can make the case for it. The Callisto Protocol wasn't the best game, and it had too much melee in it. It was fun for one or two playthroughs, but after that, there really wasn't a point. I think it was maybe it wasn't. Was it an easy platinum? It may have been an easy platinum. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't care. I think it may have. Whatever. Anyways, I want more Dead Space-esque games. I think they're amazing. I think they're fun. I friggin' love Dead Space. They don't need to be horror games, but if they are horror games, that's bonus points. Just make the horror good and bonus points for it, right? I guess you could throw in Resident Evil, but I don't know. I haven't really played enough Resident Evil to really speak to it. I'm kind of ignorant on third-person Resident Evil games. I think they really, really work well as first-person games, personally, but whatever. Either way, thank you for watching. Hope you have a good one. Hope you continue having good ones. Just wanted to remind everybody, it's June. It's Men's Mental Health Month. So hope all you men are doing good. Even if it's not June when you're watching this video, pray for the men. Hope you guys have good mental health. But yeah, thank you for watching the video. Until next time, though, I'm going to have to catch you later. Take care.